My name is Maggie Dong, my pronouns are she, her, and my major is digital arts and sciences. So I identify as pansexual. I kind of see that as like being attracted to people for their personalities or just people for people. And as like gender is not the important like deciding factor here. I've moved around a lot since I was born. I was actually born in Missouri. Then I moved to Iowa, and then I moved to Pensacola, Florida, and then I moved to South Carolina. And that was where I spent like a lot of the time. So South Carolina was from 3rd grade to 8th grade. So being in Christian private school just brainwashed me even more. And I was like, the gays are bad. Like all of that is bad. No. And then like Harry Potter is bad and like all this other like miscellaneous stuff. Like those were the things that were brought to focus about things we weren't allowed to think about. So like LGBT like was even more of like a no-no. Like it wasn't even brought to focus. Like that wasn't something we talked about or even thought about. Like we just knew that is bad. So then when I moved into public middle school, 7th and 8th grade, I was exposed to like more groups of people. Looking back, it was a huge part of like how I was brought up by society. And then I moved from South Carolina to Memphis, Tennessee. And so Memphis was a good place for me to actually like see things from a different point of view. And there were like all types of people, and from there is when I truly started growing and truly like opened my eyes, and I was like, wow, there's other things to consider here, and like this super brainwashed like view isn't like all that, and like I gotta like start thinking for myself. Spring semester 10th grade, I had a girlfriend and she got me a book for my birthday. In the inside covers, she wrote like a really deep sort of like intimate note, and that day on my birthday, my mom was like, oh, what'd you get for your birthday? And I was like, oh, I got this really funny book. And then I had like a band concert that I had to play flute in later that night. And so when my mom was waiting for me in the car, she went and looked at my gifts, and she like reads, I don't know how much of it, but she read it. And then later that night, she like confronted me, and that's basically how I was like outed to my parents. So she confronted me, and she was all like, what is this, and what are you, and stuff like that, and I didn't really know what to say. And the next day, my dad told me that my mom had spent the night in the master bedroom closet looking at my childhood artwork and like kind of crying. And I had like an AP review later that day, and I was just like really upset, and like I couldn't focus on the review at all. And it was just like, it was kind of hard. My dad was kind of accepting. He mainly said like, oh, people are just born this way. And I was really surprised at that, because you know, most like Asian parents or like ethnic parents, they don't see that they're like, you weren't born this way, like what's wrong with you? But my dad had a pretty good mindset about it. My mom was just so confused. So me as a person, I'm very like wild, or like I like to have fun. And since I was in the South, people often assumed, like they looked at me and they were like, she's Asian, so she's like quiet, and she's like reserved and shy and just good at math, and like only like reads and doesn't do anything fun. So that part I had to kind of keep reintroducing to people and being like, hey, I'm fun. I don't always do math. Come on, I don't know her. When I first came to UF, I found friends that were only in one part of that identity, so I found like a bunch of LGBT friends. It was really hard to relate to them, and whenever I hung out with them, it was just kind of, it wasn't the most fun for me, and like behaviors and the way we were raised was like very different, so it kind of like showed itself in our social interactions. And so relating was hard, and I kind of didn't really feel at home. And then I found like all these Asian groups on Facebook, and I was like, whoa, like where did all these organizations come from? I found out about ASA, and so I went like by myself because I didn't have any friends, and it was like the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, I want to dance on that stage. And so like at the event, literally I went on Facebook and just joined all the orgs and like requested to be in all the dance groups and stuff. I think that even though being LGBT and being Asian are two main parts of my identity, I feel like being Asian definitely resonates more with me because it was like how I was raised for 19 years of my life, whereas being LGBT is like a generally like a new thing, and like it's not like my whole entire life, I'd say. Just like the way I was raised, like the food I eat, the like things that I value, things I believe in, my parents, and, like my relatives, like all of that is around being Asian, and like culture is like really important to me. Homosexuality, you know, it's not just a phase, it's like a journey that you grow through to finally obtain that final sense of self.